The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Hello and welcome. On this episode of the Paul Leslie Hour, we are honored to be joined by a creative force. J.D. Andrew is a songwriter, a Grammy-winning recording engineer, a producer, a guitarist, and recording artist. Some of his credits include working with the Rolling Stones, the Pussycat Dolls, the late Guy Clark, Kanye West, Will Kimbrough, who was a guest on this show, and many more. He's had a very eclectic musical experience. Along with Bud Thornton, J.D. Andrew founded the rock band the Boxmasters back in 2007, and this is a very prolific band. I mean, especially if you consider modern standards. Aside from just all the touring, I think this is the 9th album. Is that correct?
You know what? I lose track as to whether it's the 8th or 9th. We've recorded so many of them, and there's, 3 or 4 or 5 that we finished that have never come out. So that's why I kind of lose track as to which ones. I think officially this is 8. There's always plenty of stuff waiting to come out, or, we'll see if it ever sees the light of day. Some of them, are records that are made more for, I guess, personal reasons or personal, like creative fulfillment, mainly for Billy on the, the lyrics and something that he's, talking about. And so some of it maybe is not, maybe it'll be interesting to people when, if we ever put them out, but I don't know. It might just be too inside of Billy's head for to ever, appeal to other people. But a lot of records that are made, were really, personal to somebody, and then it means a lot to somebody else. And so sometimes it might actually be just convincing Billy, like, this is a great record, let's put it out. So we got a couple like that are very, I would say, autobiographical for him. So it's just a matter of convincing him that, we need to put these records out and that people want to hear them. So we'll see.
This latest album, Speck, really incredible, produced with the late and legendary Geoff Emerick, who a lot of people will recognize that name for all of his work with the Beatles.
Yeah, it was quite an experience because we've known Geoff for quite a while. He was actually in the pictures of our first Boxmasters record. He kind of appeared as our, label suit guy is kind of how we described him, as we were the young whippersnappers, standing around the console listening to something. But, the kind of the gatefold picture has Geoff in it. And he, has been a friend of ours for a long time. And we casually talked about working in some capacity at some point. But it was about 2 Decembers ago that Billy and Geoff met up and were talking about doing something. And so we had this record partially done. And so we, said, well, maybe we should let him give a crack at mixing a couple of songs. And of course, the first one he did is the first single of the record, I Want to Go Where You Go, the first song on the record. And when we heard that, we were just blown away. And, it had all these elements of Beatles records. Essentially, there's a lot of effects on the voice. It's like the Leslie kind of sound and the slapback ADT kind of stuff. And we were just like, how did you do that? And he's just like, I'm not going to tell you. It's like, so it was, it was a lot of fun. And so after we heard that, we just kind of agreed it'd be great to have Geoff produce the record, and we would, finish the record with him. So we recorded a few more songs, and then he mixed the whole thing, listened to amazing stories about working with the Beatles and McCartney and Badfinger and, all the bands that we are huge fans of. We got to hear stories, like personal accounts of what it was like working with those people. And Geoff was also, he was very English. And so, a lot of the time we'd be like, oh, I hated that. It's like, because there was lizards on the wall in my hotel, doing Band on the Run or something like that. And, it was, it was always just entertaining how he would tell the story as well as then hearing, about the story that he would have to share. But he invented so many of these recording techniques that we take for granted. They were coming up with all the things. They were, all constantly trying to make a sound that was something new and different. And Geoff was always along for the ride and pioneering a lot of the techniques that we have just used for 40 or 50 years, however long it's been. So it was really neat watching him do some of the things. It was like, oh, that's right. You are the guy that did that first.
For somebody who is a recording or a studio buff, is it at all intimidating being around Geoff Emerick?
It's completely intimidating all the time because, it's like you want him to, first off, like the songs and like the performances, but then at the same time, it's like, I want him to like how it sounds, so hopefully the recording process before he had come along, hopefully it was, wasn't something that he was fighting or, like he was, hating everything I did. But the sad thing about losing Geoff is I never got to ask him. It's like, what did you like about these recordings, or what did you hate? What did you find difficult? He made everything sound good. So it took a little while because, I was so like with this band, I've been in there with my hands on it every step of every way of every song from beginning to end. And so having somebody else touch this was, a little bit strange. So like after the first initial, like, holy cow, this sounds amazing. Then it's like, you start listening to stuff and you start like kind of second guessing. And then it takes a little while. And then all of a sudden you're like back to, you're just, a fan of like, oh man, that sounds really great. I really get excited to hear these songs. 'Cause for a while it was kind of like, oh, I don't know. It's like, maybe I would turn the vocal up, or turn those guitars up, or turn that one down, or something like that. But now it's just like, I just enjoy every bit of it. And I really appreciate what he did.
I'm hoping you can tell us about the writing process for this album. Do you have any recollections from writing these songs?
Well, on some of them, like I Want to Go Where You Go is a song that we started in 2009 or 10. And so that one's especially one that I don't remember how we came up with that. But 95% of the songs start with Billy kind of messing around with he'll have a lyric and a melody of some sort for the chorus or the verse. Like that song, I can kind of remember him going, with the I want to go. It's like you got to follow the melody that he's got, because most of the time he has a melody going when he's coming up the lyrics, so it kind of drives where he's going. Sometimes he'll start plinking on a guitar. There's a song Days Gone that Billy pretty much wrote the entire thing on the ukulele and then played the ukulele part. He's got a little room in his house where he watches TV, and we set up our recording equipment that we had taken out of the old house with the studio in it. We put a few things in this room and kind of intended on it being our place where we would do a little work, but we just never got, I don't know, we'd rather go to the studio and do it. So he sits there on his couch and watches baseball and Sports Center, and we'll just have a little travel guitar, and he just kind of comes up with things that sounds good to him, and then we get together and turn it into a full song. There's Watching the Radio is a song that was also kind of old, but I remember that was one where Billy used to watch the music channels on DirecTV. It used to be like the Sirius XM before it became their own personal service or whatever, and he would sit there and listen to the 60s on 6 or 70s on, the 60s and 70s channels. One day I walked in and said, "Hey, what you doing? Watching the radio?" He then turned that into a song about a guy that thinks that the TV is watching him, and basically a guy that's paranoid about technology and how it's, invading his life. And so, it's one of the few that is like, okay, I actually had a a hand in the writing of the words of that, just, a little bit, but mostly Billy writes all of the lyrics, and then I help out with the music in some capacity. Other times there's a song or two that I'll start all the music, and then he'll come up with words for it after, pretty much the whole song is written. The song, Speck, the title song, we started on the tour bus a couple tours back, where I was sitting there playing the kind of, hook instrumental part, and then do, and, coming up with the chords for that. Then Billy's like, yeah, keep working on that. Let's figure out where it goes. And then he started sitting there, and, we started writing some words for it. Here She Comes is a song that, we started on the bus. I believe we went to, the Nut House in Sheffield, Alabama. Went to, this guy, Jimmy Nutt Studio. Billy's got a really good friend named Donnie Fritz down in Muscle Shoals. And so he was asking him, where could we stop on tour and go record a song or a few songs for the next record? And Donnie said that everybody that he knew went over to Jimmy Nutt's studio. It's this old bank building that he turned into a recording studio, and really nice place. And they still have the vault, which was really, really cool, because it's, this humongous heavy door, and they close it and put guitar amps in it. And it's like really, a great isolation space. But we started the Here She Comes on the bus, finished it at about 5 or 6 in the morning, and then started the session at 9 or 10. When we got home, listened to it, after the tour, we were like, man, this is about 3 steps too low. Because we were just he was singing it like 2 or 3 steps lower so we had to come back, record all the instruments. We kept the drums part of it, but we weren't able to keep anything else. I just remember that was when we just sat on the bus, all three, me, Teddy, and Billy, and we just worked on that thing until we got it all finished. All the songs kind of come from different places, but they all share that they're all inspired. They're not, we're, making appointments to write a song where it's like something comes to us, and, we follow it until we get the song done. And if we, put the song down typically, or, like just start it and don't finish it kind of right away, then we're both pretty, the attention span's not too long. So it's like, if it doesn't stick with us and we don't finish it right then, we'll just move on to something else and kind of forget whatever else it was.
When I was introducing you to the listeners, I was talking about all these musical things you pursue, from the songwriting, as we've just been talking about, engineering, performing. Could you say that there is a main focus for you? What you're the most passionate about?
It's always, everything is kind of started for me as the root has been in recording. I started as a kid. I was a singer in like various like church groups, and then my elementary and high school were really big vocal music schools. I played in the band as well but our vocal music program was really strong. And so the other thing was that our instructor, our, leader of the music program, was also the leader of the local stagehands union in Salina, Kansas. And so every once in a while he would hire a few of us kids to come unload trucks or something at the arena for concerts. And I was always like super thrilled by seeing, a stage built and seeing a show and seeing it all put together, seeing a rigger climb a rope into the truss and watch him play with lights or things like that. It was always amazing to me. And I was always a big fan of like setting up the gear for a high school dance. And even if it was just a tape deck and a couple of big speakers, it was always really exciting to me to set up the gear. When I figured out that recording was kind of a thing, I just kind of had an epiphany that it's like, I want to make records someday. And before that, I'd kind of been just like rolling along through school and always did okay, but I didn't have much focus or care for it. But once I figured out recording was a thing and you could actually do it, then I started, really getting focused on it. And I went to school for it for a year and then went to Nashville. Nashville's where I really got to cut my teeth because I worked for EMI Music Publishing making cassette tapes during the day of song demos, which is where I worked with Bruce Birch. And so Bruce would bring in a list of songs and we'd take them off of DAT tapes and put them on a cassette so that they could take the songs around and pitch them to other artists and producers so they could record the songs. But the EMI building had a studio in the basement. And the other great thing about Nashville was that they stopped working at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening and the studio sat empty every night. I basically took it over as my kind of place that I would spend all my time. And a friend of mine named Bob Bailey Lemansky was pretty tied into the rock band part of Nashville. He was friends with Will Kimbrough and Tommy Womack. There were guys that I befriended and said, hey, why don't you come over to the studio and record some stuff? We recorded a few demos on everybody. Will got the idea that we should make a record, so we started cranking out his first solo record, which was called This. Right before that was done is when I decided I should move to Los Angeles because I had a friend or a producer, engineer that I'd worked for who said that if I really wanted to learn how to be an engineer, I needed to move to LA because it's where he'd come from. He had worked with big studios and he had been an assistant at Conway. His wife then was managing Conway. He called me one day, ironically, right before I was coming to LA on a vacation to see a friend of mine. And he said, hey, my wife just fired somebody at Conway. Go see her. Go get the job. And so I went. I started working the next day. I flew back to Nashville, got my car, loaded it up, and moved. It was, I don't know, it was quite a trip. It just all of a sudden just like dived right into one of the biggest, coolest studios in Los Angeles and saw, all these guys. I remember the first session that was going on while I was there was for the movie, I think, Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg. And so there was all these, Zach Wilde and I think Jason Bonham and all these, big rock dudes all in there on this big room making this soundtrack to this movie. And, I was pretty blown away right away that this is kind of stuff going on here. This is going to be exciting.
Recording studios are magical places, aren't they?
Yeah, they're full of creativity, and they're also kind of places for anarchy. They're typically there's no clocks, or at least no one pays attention to a clock. They're cut off kind of from the outside world. You don't leave. Like people go out and get food for you so that you don't have to leave. If you if you want to party, that's, you can do it basically, discreetly or, without, anybody finding out. That's usually, I'm more of the worker aspect and also, creatively, you can, you have this playground to, whatever you can think of. You can, attempt to, find these sounds. I don't know. It's always just really fit in with, kind of how I feel about having freedom to do kind of whatever you want to. It's like, that's the studio. That's your safe space. It's where I like to be, when I'm not playing with my kids, I guess. But I've spent so much time in the studio over the years that, it's my home. It's my good space.
It truly is a place, like you were saying, that you can totally lose track of time. You can say, I can't believe it's still light out. And then it dawns on you, it's light again.
Exactly. Because most of the time, it used to be a lot of the time we would go, we'd start work in the late afternoon when it'd be getting dark. And, yeah, I would be leaving the studio when the sun's coming up. So, yeah, me and Billy used to work. It'd be kind of, our hours were typically like 3 o'clock until 5 o'clock. And so 3 in the afternoon until 5 in the morning was how we worked every day, 6 days a week for 5 years, I think it was, pretty much straight. We would take some time off to tour, but that was it. You know, we just nonstop recorded. And then we took a little time off because Billy made a movie where he wrote and directed it. And then, so we had to go down to Georgia and shoot that for a little while. But the rest of the time, you know, we worked just constantly for years. Then he sold the house that had the studio in it. So thankfully, right about the time I had my first kid was when he sold the house, and we stopped the madness of all those hours in the studio. But we still find time to get in as much as we can, and are always cranking out songs. We were just in this weekend and, you know, did 4 or 5 songs in 3 days. So pretty good times.
When you first met Billy Bob Thornton, what did you think about him? What was the first impression?
You know, I was brought in to record vocals for 2 weeks. That was basically what I was told I'd be doing. He was finishing his 4th solo record, which was called Beautiful Door, which it's a really great record. He and Brad Davis were essentially making it together by themselves, and they'd been working on it for a while. And Brad is, you know, an amazing guitar player and amazing guy that he's, you know, part of the band on and off all the time. He's got a studio in Texas that he works at a lot, or, you know, he owns that, you know, he's always busy at. But thankfully this summer for this tour, he's making some time and he's going to go on the road with us. But he and Billy were working on that record for a while, and Billy had another engineer because the house that he had that had the studio, he had bought from Slash, and the engineer that had worked with Slash just kind of stayed on. You know, Billy said, hey, why don't you just stay here? You know, the studio, why don't you help me? And so he had worked with him for 6 or 7 years at that point. But Jim Mitchell is his name. Jim also had a kind of his side gig was doing on-air audio for Fox Sports. And so he worked on stuff like NASCAR and the NFL on Fox and stuff like that. And he was just needed more and more at Fox than the amount of time that Billy needed him. So they were looking for somebody to come in and do some overdubs for 2, maybe 3 weeks. And I really, from the first song that they played, I was really impressed. I really liked that record. And I was really excited to, you know, help out on it because I was like, this is really great. And just right off the bat, me and Billy got along really well because we're both, you know, I'm from Kansas. He's from Arkansas. I'd been in Nashville. So essentially we were from the same general region of the country. And then we're both huge baseball fans, big college sports fans, and also like just huge Beatles fans and 60s music in general fans. So like we had so many common ground elements that we always, you know, had something that we were talking about and getting off track on. And Billy was constantly like, oh, you know, you like this. Have you ever heard of Chad and Jeremy or something like that? And so that's kind of how we got into, you know, we started recording because at one point Billy was asked to record a version of Lost Highway for a Canadian TV show. And so he's like, hey, I got asked to do this song. You know, Brad's not here. Would you give a crack at playing guitar on this? And, you know, I hadn't played guitar on anything in years, and I never focused on playing. Didn't want to be a guitar player. I was a singer. I learned how to play guitar enough to accompany myself, like playing at bars in Manhattan, Kansas. That was pretty much all I, you know, cared about as far as being a guitar player. It was not no interest in it really at that point. But so Billy asked me, so I played the song, and when we got done with it, it just had this kind of raw, garagey kind of Rolling Stones kind of thing to it. And then, of course, then he called Dan Lanois, and Dan came over and played steel on it and did a mix on the song. And I don't know if it ever actually made it to the TV show or if they used it, but it was how we started the band. And so, like, after that, then Billy started throwing me all these things. He's like, so listen to this. This is, a British band trying to play, a hillbilly song, an American hillbilly song from, something. And he's like, just, listen to these things. Listen to how they do it. So we started like taking it backwards and, like doing hillbilly versions of, British Invasion songs and British Invasion versions of hillbilly songs too. And just, that's kind of how we started the band, of doing these kind of weird combinations of things. And they were just all really, experimental, but, we decided to keep doing it. And then, we would open, the Boxmasters would open for Billy Bob Thornton, on the road. So we did that for a couple of tours while we finished the record. And then when our first record came out, then we just kind of stopped and said, all right, this is the Boxmasters. We're just going to do this now. And over the years have gone, we kind of took the experimental stuff and kind of put that aside and just kind of focused on just writing songs that were just kind of natural to us, like how we play naturally and how, taking all the elements of all the things that we love, especially from, the British Invasion and, Southern California rock and roll, like the Byrds and the Beach Boys, taking those things and putting them all together and just making the sound that now sounds like us. It's kind of the same thing, like Petty did and the Heartbreakers, with stuff. You take the Beatles and the Byrds and, they took Dylan. Billy's not as much of a Dylan fan. He's a fan of Dylan, but he's not taking as much inspiration from Dylan as Tom Petty did. Billy's is more Frank Zappa, I guess, inspired than Dylan. But, just taking all those things and basically it's like we take them in, we spit them out, they sound like us. So, yeah, I completely lost track of where we were starting there.
I was asking you, what was your first initial impression when you met him?
Oh, yeah. No, I just was really impressed with that first song that I heard, and then how well we got along, as people. It's like we were just kind of, peas in a pod in the kind of things that we liked. So as people, we got along. So it made it easy to spend a lot of time together and, and really work on, whatever came to mind.
So you think this commonality is part of the reason you two are very good at creating together?
That, and we both, we respect each other and we trust each other. I'm a huge fan of everything that Billy does. I really like how he writes. I really like his lyrics. The music is always really inspiring to me. And at the same time, it's stuff that I get to put my, 2 cents into everything. And it's the music that, it just comes out of me. It's natural sounding. It's how I play. The first couple of records were, really working on like trying to make a sound and working hard at coming up with parts that worked within the framework and the limitations and restrictions that we put on ourselves to, make those records. And now it's just, we're just free to create whatever we want, and anything that comes to mind, we're able to give it a shot. We don't have anybody else telling us, hey, you can't do that. So we just do stuff that inspires us, things that allow us to create freely, and we're not looking for other people to judge us other than, hey, do you like this? Okay, great. If you don't, then okay, I hope you find something else that you like. But, we're not going to stop, and, we're going to keep coming up, with songs that inspire us, and, hopefully people will listen to them and enjoy them.
What can you tell us about Teddy of the Boxmasters?
Teddy Andriotis, a.k.a. Teddy Zigzag, is a force of nature. He is he's an amazing keyboard player. He's got amazing attention deficit disorder, and he is a lot of fun. I mean, he's just an entertaining guy. He's a consummate showman. He's always coming up with ideas for ways that we can entertain people more. And typically we ignore them because we're not exactly an entertaining kind of band. We're get out there and play our music, and we'll put on as much of a show as we can. It's we're not kids, so we're not going to jump around. We're not going to do choreography. We're going to get up there. We're going to play our songs and hopefully play them as well as we can, so that they can not be horribly offensively un-ear pleasing, I guess. But he's just, he's a good guy. He's played with Billy since the early 2000s, like 2001 or something like that, somewhere on the first record, Billy's first solo record tours. I think Teddy didn't do the first one or two, but somewhere, around, the second or third tour, Teddy was brought into the band. And, Teddy had played with Guns N' Roses, and so that's how he was brought into the camp, because, I think Billy or somebody asked Slash, is like, hey, do you know any keyboard players? Because the guy that we've used before isn't available. So then they said, well, yeah, Teddy plays in my band. Why didn't he, you can use him. And so he's always been around. So that's one thing, Billy's, he's, very loyal. He likes his people that are friends, people that, like to stay around, and also, who play, who, do exactly, musically what we need, what, that they bring something, some element of themselves, and they have the same kind of influences and stuff. And Teddy's got all that, the same, he loves the same stuff, and is entertaining and fun to be around.
I was mentioning at the beginning of the interview all of these credits that you have working with the Rolling Stones, the Pussycat Dolls, Kanye West, Will Kimbrough, Guy Clark, who was one of the great songwriters of our time.
Yeah, that was the first record I ever got to work on. It was one of the EMI things, and Chris Latham was the studio engineer, studio manager, and he had been doing that record with them. And Chris had some sort of family emergency, and he said, hey, I know you know this studio. Can you help Guy and Daryl Scott? Can you help them mix the record? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I went in and I helped them. Yeah, it was just a great experience, because Guy I knew him a little bit from, working in the tape room, and I'd make copies of tapes for him, and same with Daryl and Verlin Thompson. And, they were heroes of mine. I loved those guys' songs, and just being around them was so much fun. Guy was such a character and such an inspiration to so many, musicians and everyone that got to know him. I'm really honored that I was able to just sit in the room with those guys for, a little bit. Really proud that was the first record I ever got credit on. Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, given the nature of the caliber of the artists that you worked with, what would you say is the most valuable thing you've learned from working with these people?
That is a question. I mean, pretty much everybody that of the, the Rolling Stones, the Guy Clarks, even the Will Kimbroughs, and they're all people that they are unique. They're not, the Stones have had an amazing, varied career, but these people are all pretty much doing what they've always done. They're themselves. They're just writing their songs. They're playing it, and they're just being true to their artistry. some of the stuff that I've done has, been pop records, and those are just, they're making music for, more of a mass consumption kind of thing. And the personalness isn't necessarily one of the aspects of it. But, the people that I've worked with that, I really enjoy their music and their artistry, are the Stones and the Guy Clarks and the Will Kimbroughs. And I should have mentioned also, it's like I was able, one of the first records I was ever made at the EMI studio was Dan Baird was producing a band called Betty Rocker that was a local Nashville band. And it was the first thing that I said, hey, let's make a record. I've got a studio. If you guys can be flexible and come in and in weekends and at nights and stuff, then we can finish this record, or we can, make a record and finish it. I learned so much from Dan on how to make a rock record and had so much fun doing it. He's such a force of nature, that guy, and his creativity and just his personality. I just had so much fun. It was so inspiring working with them, just helped me go in the right direction. Like for, really just going in and just going after songs and just going out, playing rock and roll with a feeling. I don't know. It just really, it's a record that I listen to, I go back and listen to every couple years. Because it never came out. We finished the record and they broke up, kind of immediately as we were finishing it. But so I'm kind of the only person that's ever gotten to listen to that record in its entirety. And those people though, they're really themselves. They're really their own artists, and they make music the way they want to make it.
I heard in another interview one time that you did, and you talked about being on a tour, sharing a bill with people like Willie Nelson, the late Ray Price. Has there been anyone, and as we mentioned, all these other people, has there been anyone that you were just almost like you were excited, but at the same time, it was almost like it was mortifying to be around? Like you became starstruck.
Well, I remember one time we played the Ramble at the Ryman with Levon Helm.
Oh, wow.
And we got to go out there and play. We played a song called That Mountain, which was off of our first record that Billy wrote with Marty Stewart. That was on his first solo record, too. We went and did that song with Levon and his band and whoever else was on stage. And I'm pretty good at not being nervous. I manage my nervousness pretty well, but that was the one night where I really thought I was going to throw up going to the stage. And, Levon's an amazing guy, and we'd met him before. And so it wasn't exactly that that Levon per se that was, that made me nervous, because he really had a way of making you feel comfortable. He was such a generous, personable guy that, it was never him per se that was, made me nervous, but it was like just being on that stage, and then the people in the audience, there were so many people on that show that, they would come from backstage, and then you'd see them out in the audience or something like that. And, I just remember that, feeling as we're going on. Once we were there, it was fine, but just the whole anticipation of that was pretty overwhelming. I remember early in my, assistant engineering days, there's, an engineer named Al Schmidt who's won more Grammys than about any person in history.
Oh, yeah.
And so I assisted Al at it was kind of the first studio that I was an assistant engineer at, and I was super green, and it was a project that he didn't necessarily want to do, but he was doing it for a friend as a favor, like for a weekend, like a 3-piece jazz band with a singer. I remember wanting to impress so much and have everything so perfect. And I started basically behind the 8 ball right off the bat. It's like all of a sudden, like I had to add we were recording as a tape, and they, at the last second, asked for Dolby SR, which was a noise reduction for the tape. And I'd never set it up before, and so it took me like twice as long to set up the Dolby as, I had anticipated, and I had checked everything, but we had a really old Neve console that was really finicky, and so, of course, a couple of the microphones didn't work as, we hit record for the first song, and I felt sick. I was just, I was so nervous doing this session that I just basically was just, drowning. It's just like trying to swim out of this, and it was just horrible. Just working with some of these guys, and, they're so experienced and so no nonsense kind of guys that it's like once you just slip a little bit, you're just like, you just feel awful, and you just keep like digging yourself a hole, and you're just never going to get out of it. But eventually you do, and eventually they get all the songs recorded, and you say, thank you. See you later. But I'm trying to think of other artists that I've met that were that made me that nervous, but most of the time it's you're there, you're doing your job. I did assist on a Jerry Lee Lewis duets record where he did one with Ringo Starr, and that was a little unnerving.
How cool though.
That was, yeah, I mean, that was a huge experience. I mean, it's one day of just like, you got to be kidding me. This is the room I'm in with all these guys. This is unbelievable.
Wow. I mean, just to think of it, Jerry Lee Lewis and Ringo Starr.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's like, and the first time I met with the Stones, or, worked with the Stones, it was, I'm sure it was like, I could barely keep myself inside my skin, but Mick was always really good about, making you feel comfortable, and, like, okay, we're here to work, let's, but, it's always, you just like, you turn your head and you're like, that's Mick Jagger. Or, that's Keith Richards. This is nuts. You have to learn to kind of, manage that kind of excitement and that nervousness, and, cause you got a job to do, and they're not in there to have somebody mess their stuff up. They're in there to work, get stuff done, and, get on to, whatever else they got going on. So you just got to get it done.
What is the best thing about being J.D. Andrew?
Goodness. I guess, I mean, sometimes I don't think it is, but, one good thing is I get to do all sorts of stuff. I'm doing so many other things that I don't have time to get burned out on, one thing or the other. So I do, our work with the band. I have a couple other bands that I work with kind of here and there. And then other stuff I do like is, post-production stuff. So I'll do like foreign language versions of TV shows. I'll mix those. Just did, 6 languages for the Arrested Development for Netflix. The good thing about that is I'm doing audio work, which I really love, but it's not creative audio work, if you know what I mean. It's technical. It's like just trying to get it all
right
to work, and figuring out ways to do it quicker and easier, and it's not a creative endeavor. It's creativity only in the way that it aids getting the job done. And so I really enjoy doing stuff like that, because I like to problem solve, and I like to figure out ways to do different things that might maybe just make it so I can do it faster. And then I can take some of that information, use it in, in the work that we do, in the music and the creativity of that. I know having all these other tools and skill sets just helps be able to get the work done on other projects.
Well, I have 2 final questions. One is kind of lighthearted.
Okay.
Something about being a touring musician is you get to travel around and you have to eat. And so when you're out on the road with the Boxmasters, what is that restaurant? When you hit that city, you guys know, oh gosh, there's a huge bonus here. Remember, there's this restaurant. Can you think of one?
I'm going through cities of where we go. You know, it's, a lot of the time we play so many different varied places that it's, you know, and we're not going back to like the same place every year or anything like that. There's a few that we do, like Kansas City, we play Knuckleheads every tour, but they're kind of in a location where the food's not really near them. We just eat at the club. Or Springfield, Illinois, we play at this place called Boondocks. Me and Billy typically go to a little Mexican restaurant there that's close to the hotel. But they're not really, I wouldn't say it's something I look forward to. Billy eats pretty, not going to say strangely, but he's really allergic to like wheat and dairy and shellfish and stuff. So it kind of limits what he can eat. So typically what we find is someplace, usually like Mexican food is usually pretty safe, you know, because he likes guacamole a lot. I don't know, living in Los Angeles, we're, you know, huge Mexican food fans. I mean, I look like I eat really well all the time on tour, but it's when we tour, we don't take very many days off. So, you know, we have 4 days off, I think, in July, 2 days off, 3 days off, or something like that in August, in the, you know, first half of August when we're touring. So typically our day is we pull into the town that we're going to play sometime in the morning. The bus, you know, gets there. They start unloading, setting up the stage. We go to the hotel to take a shower and then eat lunch sometime mid-afternoon at typically whatever is close by. I should say Billy's also a big fan of Applebee's and Chili's. You know, it's not, it's something that is comfortable and, you know, go have a beverage of some sort and kind of kick off the day and then go do sound check. And then the venue will have some sort of food for us for dinner. And then we get on the bus and we go to the next city. So it's not, we don't have much time to do touring around, seeing the sights. A lot of the time we'll do a radio show or some sort of press thing in the morning or, you know, midday-ish to kind of promote the show, or we'll be doing them in advance for other shows. You know, we're trying to book a few record in stores for this tour. We're trying to do, you know, just do more stuff where we get out, try to do, you know, even more promotion. You know, we're always trying to do trying to get the newspaper stuff going. And we try to do that before the tour actually starts so that, you know, they're writing before we actually get to the town. Just constantly trying to promote this band and, you know, keep it going. Really, hopefully, you know, people will like the record and buy it. And, you know, we use that money that we sell records, that we make on selling the records, to record more records. We just use all of that for studio time. As long as we can just keep recording and then have something kind of for every tour, have a release. That's kind of what keeps us going, is just keep creating. As long as we can keep creating, then we can keep going.
Walt Disney said, "We don't make movies to make money. We make movies so that we can make more movies."
Absolutely. No, that's exactly it. You know, we are touring to support ourselves and our families, and we are selling records to sell more records. And that is completely it. If you could survive on just, you know, creation alone, then we would do that. People don't pay you to just create and never see anything. So we just keep going. I don't know. I like our records, and I hope, I know that some people do, and hopefully a few more people will check them out.
Absolutely. I want everyone out there to check out this new album from the Boxmasters, Speck. You can also go on theboxmasters.com, see them on tour, buy the record.
We got some really good new t-shirts. The designs just got announced in the last day or two, and I'm really proud of the work our website commerce guy, Rob Finn, is doing. He's also an amazing photographer. He tries to go on tour with us, but of course this tour, he's doing a book with Rob Zombie, and so he's going to be on Rob Zombie's tour instead of ours, which is somewhat disappointing. I don't know. We've got some pretty great shirts and coming up with some other fun things. And I don't know, every aspect of, like all the things that we can make up are, that's exciting. It's like making a t-shirt design. It's, not necessarily something I've spent that much time doing, but I really, really like all this, all the things you can do to fire up your synapses and get, the juices flowing. So I don't know, all these aspects are really exciting to me. So moving into t-shirt making.
Before we go, do you have any parting words for our listeners?
Give our music a listen. You can pre-order the record at Amazon and iTunes and all that right now and get a discount up until June 7th when the actual release date is. But, if our music isn't your cup of tea, just find something else that is. We're not going to force anybody to listen to us or force anybody to listen to anything. But if you find something that you like, hopefully you'll get out and support it. You get out and see the shows and buy the records and buy the t-shirts and really support so that people can keep making music or making their art. Because if we don't support the people that we like, they're not going to be able to keep making the art. So we want to just keep supporting people, keep creativity alive, keep it alive in schools, because that's where mine started, was a really strong music program in my school. And I know that so many schools are losing their music programs, losing their art programs. And if the kids aren't introduced to it, they're not going to find it. There's so many other things that take kids' attention these days that if they're not exposed to music and art and theater and drama and all of these creative endeavors that we've done as people for millennia, they're not going to keep it alive. And then it'll just be whoever makes the beat and whoever says the goofy thing over and over and over. That'll be what music is or something. So just please support the arts in whatever aspect you can.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Paul.
My pleasure. All right, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Boo-bop-a-ree, boo-bop-a-shy, a-kee-na-pa-tee-la-la-ka-see-ka-ba-boo, to-get-gon. Con dig it, but a good leggy. Ah, yeah, Nakashi, that boy, the suddenly walk it jig along. Take on some cat top to leave a deeka party, chichika, goodbye.